Okay. Hey guys, welcome and thanks for watching. I guess this is actually our first episode that we're filming. We're here with the two Otati guys, and we're looking at some 90s super saloons. So thanks for coming in. This is Talking Cars episode 1, in case you aren't aware. Thanks for coming, Otatis.
Yeah, thank you.
This is Mike Otati and Joe Otati. You probably know both of them if you're watching this. These are both Mike's cars, and they're both pretty hot cars right now on the market, especially the 500e. You've probably seen it all over the place on Bring a Trailer and some other websites, and then plus a lot of people kind of bringing them back into fame now. So thanks for coming, guys. And
Thank you.
I think go ahead and give an intro, however you want, whatever you feel comfortable saying, and then what's your interest in these cars, all of that.
Well, I'm a long-term e34 M5 owner and fan. This is I probably had 4 or 5 of them. This is a European model, bigger engine, 3.8 liter. A little more power. It's got some stuff that the U.S. market cars didn't get. Electronic dampening suspension. You can get some more interesting cloth and Alcantara interiors. I've had this one for about 8 years. Currently sits at 240,000 kilometers, so 145,000 miles. I've put about 70,000 kilometers of that on it, and probably my all-time favorite of everything I have right now.
That's for reference for anybody that doesn't know. He has I don't know, how many cars do you have?
I don't know.
Or how many cars have you had? You think over 50?
Oh yeah, I couldn't tell you how many. Yeah, I don't know. We have to sit down with paper and figure that out.
Yeah, and this is a pretty interesting M5 too. You've done quite a lot. It's not exactly OEM.
Yeah, it's kind of
OEM plus kind
yeah,
of.
that's kind of I don't want to stray too far from factory, but I do some little OEM plus touches.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And then the 500e, give us a little bit. Spiel on that.
I mean, that was always a bucket list car also. I mean, I kind of like the super saloon thing. This one I've had for a few months and have done some sorting on it. 227,000 miles currently. I think we've put 2 or 3 of those on it. But really phenomenal car, amazing driver, great road trip car. Some say the best sedan ever made, maybe. It's pretty equivalent in power and performance to the M5, and it's just one of those cars that you just want to get out and drive. I mean, it's got tons of road rash on it, and that shows that it's been out there and it's been doing it for a while.
Yeah, cool. So I guess zooming out of these 2 cars specifically, I feel like with people like you that have ever expanding collections, it's hard to pinpoint maybe one point in your life, but do you have a point in your life that you can look back to that was the first memory of your interest in cars? Anything like that?
No, I was born liking cars.
Yeah.
I mean, it was from a kid with Hot Wheels to models to go-karts to, I started working on my first car when I was 13 years old, and that was the car I ended up driving when I turned 16 and went to high school.
What was it?
67 Pontiac Le Mans.
Okay.
So, my parents actually bought it brand new, and I always had an interest in it, and they said, we're going to give you this car when you turn 16. Unfortunately, a few years prior to that, my mom blew up the engine, and it got parked in the corner of the driveway, and that's when my project started. So
did you do that whole rebuild yourself?
Most of it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's where it
was driving and looking pretty good by the time I started driving it at 16.
It's funny, you've come, at least since I've known you, you've come full cycle.
Back
full
into
circle.
some of the American muscle car stuff again. Yeah. Well, I mean, these are kind of the same thing. I was a big American muscle car guy in the 80s when I started driving. These cars were brand new. I worked at a detailing shop through high school and college, and some of our big accounts were dealers. So I got to work with these cars when they were brand new. And when in the summer of 1990, when the e34 M5 hit the market, the sales manager from BMW pulls up in a silver E34. It had these funky looking wheels that looked like white walls because they were dirty. And it had a really mean bassy idle. And I walked out and I'm like, what is this? And he's like, you don't know what an M5 is? I'm like, well, not this generation. And it was the first one they got. He tosses me the keys. He gets in the passenger seat and he says, let's go. And being the kind of clean cut college kid in the detailing shop, I got trusted with a lot of the stuff that, that they wouldn't necessarily trust other people with. And driving that car was just a revelation. I'm like, this thing does everything that my muscle cars do and more. You know, it's comfortable, it's quick, it's got working air conditioning and a good stereo, and it handles and brakes. and so that became like, one of these days I'm going to have one of these.
Right.
And you know,
that's funny. I had no idea you also worked in a detailing shop when you were younger, because that's like, Joe, is that how you got interested in it? Did you like learn a bit from your dad, or like what? You know, is there a bridge there at all, or is that just
we used to, because we used to always work on stuff together, and
yeah. You guys are. I mean, I don't know anybody here that's like watching from outside the Bay Area or even outside the German community of cars. Like, they're kind of a little bit of a cult. The Ottati family Mercedes cars and the BMWs. It's pretty. Like, you guys have built some pretty cool cars. So,
we've had a few good projects.
Yeah.
Two successes.
So I'm curious to hear, like we were saying earlier, I think there's two like pretty big camps of support for each of these cars, and they kind of lie on different ends of the spectrum. And I'm curious to hear both of your takes on each car, and where they lie relative to each other. Like, what, you know, what's your ideal use case for each of these cars, and if there is one that you'd prefer for everything, like which is the everything car?
Right. Do you want to try that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have more experience with the M5s, just because I've been around them for like 10 years, because I've had one for 10, 15 years. And to me, just driving that car maybe like 500 miles, there isn't really a difference. I mean, they're different cars completely. I don't really even relate them to be similar at all. The M5 is way, like, exponentially more sporty. Way better to drive on back roads. The steering is better in every way. It's manual, so that's better. The seats hold you in way better, and the engine is significantly more peaky. Besides the Euro cars, so like US cars are very peaky and need to be wound out. In this car, I could turn it on and I could just drive it to a coffee shop, and I get out of it. And then I lock the doors and I walk away. And
when you say this car, you mean the 500D?
Yeah, the 500D. Yeah. And it just feels like a regular, like, Mercedes to me. A fast Mercedes that, when you look at certain angles, has fender flares, and you start to realize it's special. But when you get in it, if you were to blindfold me and I were to, you know, sit in the passenger seat of a 500D, it would just feel like a regular, like, executive Mercedes sedan. But if you were to blindfold me in an M5, I mean, it has a crazy idle. Sounds way better, in my opinion. I just don't think there's any difference or any similarities at all, basically. I mean, besides the 4 doors.
Yeah.
I mean, they're two cars that post similar performance numbers, you know, 0 to 60 in high fives, you know, electronically limited to 155. They both probably weigh about the same. I mean, if I were to say anything, maybe the M5's a little lighter, but the M5 in Euro trim with manual seats and all that is still like a 3,700 pound car, and Mercedes is probably a little bit more than that. But they're both cars that you could, if you don't take them over 4,000 RPM, you'd really never know much what they could do. Although, like Joe was saying, the M5 has got, you know, uneven idle that you know, it sounds a lot more racy. Sure. And I remember just as a kid, you know, pulling these things into the showrooms, people, you know, normal BMW customers of the day would look at them and be like, what is that? You know, and why is that? Why does it sound so rough?
Yeah.
They were just, you know, they were really detuned race cars. Although apparently I didn't know this before the other video came out. The M119 in this also has a racing pedigree, which I never knew. You know,
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, Mercedes, that engine debuted in the SL, but Mercedes used it in a Le Mans car with twin turbos, and apparently it won 24 Hours of Le Mans like 1990 or something like that.
Wow.
So yeah, they do have racing pedigree.
If you ring the 500 out, floor it. It
goes, yeah.
It is very, like, you start to realize, okay, there is some little bit of racing pedigree.
Yeah.
It's not as obvious as the M5. Like, the M5 is like, there's no power, and then all of a sudden there's all the power.
Yeah.
Except for, like, in the Euro cars, it's a little bit more refined. In that car, it's very, very progressively
linear,
more power.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like, it feels very limited up top. Like, you feel like it could just keep revving. And so, like, you know, I could see the racing pedigree. But I mean, the M5 is just significantly more noticeable. It's surprising that like a company let this out to the market with that kind of rough of an idle and that kind of power delivery.
It's kind of funny looking at some of the M cars, particularly I'd say like pre e46 M cars were really like, not, I don't want to say hacked together, but like they seemed like a Skunk Works race shop version of a saloon.
Like half of them have the same engine. They're all the same, like M88, SV8 variant,
variants,
like straight six engine.
Right.
Says the E30s.
Yeah. Sean, I'm curious to hear what you think. You're not exactly a saloon car guy. So Sean, for anybody that doesn't know this, Sean has like a pretty eclectic collection of cars, but I think the only thing it lacks is a sports saloon. He has an Avant, a very, very, very vast Avant, RS6 station wagon, but
yeah, I've always wanted a E34, but always at the time when I wanted one, they were unaffordable. It's so hard to find like clean examples of them, nowadays. I remember I ran into one, had to be a good 10, 15 years ago. It's like a 91 white, less than 40,000 miles on it, and the guy wanted $5,000 on it. And I said, no, it's too much.
5,000. What year was that?
It was a 91.
Yeah.
And of course now, hindsight being 2020.
That's
kind of stupid, but
that's the most. And for a U.S. spec car, 91 was the most popular year. They made the most of them.
Okay.
And they were either white, black, red, or silver. That was pretty much all you got at that point.
Right.
On a U.S. car. So.
Right. And you guys just got another 540, right? Didn't you just get an M spec?
I just bought a 540 M Sport.
Yeah.
Kind of a weird like last model year, like M5 suspension, Eurospec M5 suspension, so EDC, Nürburgring package, sway bars, and with a M60 V8.
Right.
So like 285 horsepower or something like that.
Right. So like I don't have a super deep knowledge of a lot of the different like performance divisions and their histories. Was that one of the first times that BMW started utilizing like the M badging and like M as a marketing tactic on their non-M cars?
Might have been. It might have been the first like M Sport, at least for the U.S. market. I think they had like M Sport packages even dating back to like, if you look back at the E28, there was.
Oh really?
And well,
wasn't there a Japanese market? 535M in the E28
because they had M Sport packages that would give you the body kit and the wheels and seats and all that.
Right.
I mean, if you go back even further, the E12 M535, although that really was kind of a performance car, it wasn't just like a body kit sort of package. But, but yeah, I think the M Sport for the US was, and it was because we didn't get the M5 94, 95, and they produced 200 of them. I think
200 of them for the US market,
and it was
like
just
30 for
Canada. Just a US market. Well, the Canadian cars were a little different. Even still, I think.
Yeah, they were a little bit nicer.
Yeah, they actually called those M540s.
Yeah.
And then this one, actually a car that I owned a few years ago. So I had bought it from a friend's shop, and it was towed in, and the work it needed was more than the customer wanted to pay. So the customer just wanted to bail out on the car. So I got it, and I limped it home and kind of got it more or less mechanically sorted. And then it was one of those cars that had to go to pay a tuition bill. So 1 year I sold that and a couple of other cars. Luckily sold it to a friend, and he offered it back to us recently because he was getting another M5 to join his fleet. So,
sure. It's endless.
Yeah.
That's kind of a unique car though, because it's part of like BMW's like exclusive line of cars. So you think of like cars like, the 540 M Sport. There was like an E36 kind of like 325i like Club Sport edition, which is kind of like just a base 325 but with like fancier interior and M3 suspension, as well as they had like the 318 little weird hatchback thing. They had Club Sport editions of that car. There's only like 3 or 4 different like BMW exclusive line cars, and I don't really know why they made them. It was probably like, it was the heyday of BMW. They're probably doing well, and they probably to be honest, probably just had parts like laying around and needed to get rid of them.
Yeah, so, I mean, those were made, it was kind of the end of the E34 production.
Right.
They were done by BMW individual, which was actually being done at the motorsport facility. They had a separate, kind of a separate section of at motorsport where the individual cars were built. And yeah, there was 200 of those, with 66 automatic and the rest manual.
Okay,
did those Club Sports ever come to the U.S. market?
I think the
E30s, I've seen a couple. I know that the TIs did, because it was like a package. It was like they even had BMW had special brochures for them too. And I've seen a couple of the E36 I think came in '94. So it was back when BMW North America wasn't planning on selling the E36 M3 in the US. So they had this M Sport package, or M Technic package maybe.
Yeah, M Technic.
Yeah, I've seen a couple too. I don't know. I don't remember if they were official or not, but
yeah.
So going from 1993 and speeding on up to 2021 is both brands are kind of going through a transition phase where, you know, purists either love them or hate them, especially with the new ones they're building now. What's your take on, you know, the new BMWs and the new Mercedes and all the badging that's going on between the AMGs and the M Sports and the M's?
I like a lot of what Mercedes makes. I mean, my wife drives a new 450 wagon.
Which is fast as hell.
Which is quick. I mean, for the
400 horsepower.
Yeah, for the basic, this is the lowest performance station wagon you can get in the U.S. market. It's a fast car.
Right.
And I mean, I would love a E63 wagon. That'd be cool.
Yep.
And my wife says, "Oh, you could sell 2 or 3 of your cars and buy one." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't think I want to do that though." So, and then BMW, you know, I like the only thing I like right now, I think, would be the M2. The big grills certainly don't do it for me.
Sure. Yeah, we've heard a thing or two about that.
Yeah. And I don't know. I'm kind of at the point where I'd rather take $100,000 and buy, you know, 3 or 4 older cars than one newer car.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Joe, what do you think? Where do you stand on newer cars?
I mean, I've only driven modern Mercedes and never driven any modern BMWs. Actually, I don't think.
Oh, really?
I think the newest.
I didn't know that.
The newest BMW I've driven is like 2009 or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't like the way they look, and everyone else tells me that they don't drive well. Besides the M2, of course.
Which is shocking. Sad considering their history.
You know, so I don't really have a huge. I mean, like I can't tell you how they drive because I haven't driven them. But I mean, like what my dad was saying, my mom's wagon is like a regular wagon, and the steering feel is great. The seating position is great. I can only imagine the E63 is better, like a step above that. I've driven, you know, like the lowest spec C classes, and they're okay. So I mean, I think Mercedes is doing pretty good, to be honest. I don't think BMW is doing very well, but I also think that they're appealing to a whole different market, you know, versus what they were trying to do with this. The whole M badge has become like a status symbol, kind of like Cadillac. So they're kind of, I think they're competing with Cadillac now rather than like Mercedes and even Audi. I think Audi's doing really well too.
Right. Oh yeah, Audi's market share over the last 20 years is it's unbelievable.
The whole Volkswagen Audi group is doing really good, and I think Mercedes is competing with them now only.
Right.
And I think BMW is just competing for like luxury mom status kind of thing, you know.
You're gonna make some people pretty angry. You're gonna make somebody's gonna have something to say.
Luxury mom status. People they're not gonna be watching. I mean, if you want to talk about it, we can talk about it.
I would take an E90. I would love an E90.
Yeah.
I think the E90s are really rad.
They're fine. I don't like the steering feel of E90s.
They are so underappreciated though. I mean, you can get an E90 for like a high mile E90 for under 20K right now.
Yeah.
Which is
and the interiors are relatively well built. I mean, the car itself is fine.
You can get a diesel and tune it.
Yeah. Those are really good. I mean, it's like 450. Like the torque on this is nuts.
We have a friend with one, and it is just incredible.
Yeah.
We should actually feature that one.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah. That'd be cool. I would actually love to see an E90 diesel versus an E90 M3. Like just comparo and like living with.
is probably pretty similar.
Yeah.
Or actually, I bet the diesel
takes it. Yeah.
A lot more torque. Right.
Oh yeah.
I think one of the bigger differences too is like we talked about with all the badging is, you know, it's the badges that determine the car's presence. Well, these here just look, feel, is everything, you know, on these. So I mean, yeah, they're awesome. So both awesome examples.
Yeah, I mean, back in the 90s, and the M badge was like, it was only on the cars that were built by the motorsport people, you know.
Sure.
So it meant a little bit more than it does on a typical, where you can get an M Sport X5, you know, which still has phenomenal performance, but it's not quite the same.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So do you think you'll keep both?
Yeah, these are keepers.
Long term?
Yeah,
definitely.
Sure.
Yeah, the 500D was a bucket list car. This one just happened to turn up on a Facebook group, and it was the right car at the right time at the right price that had some needs. And
I had 2 people send me this car on this listing.
I know, I told Derek to stop.
Derek sent me one.
I want this one.
Derek sent me it. Another friend sent me it. And I was about to text him, and then Joe was like, "Oh yeah, my dad's looking at the car," and I'm like, "Oh, he'll do much better to that car than I would. I'd buy this, and it would immediately die."
Yeah. Fall off a cliff.
Well, it's interesting because this car was sold at Fantasy Junction around 2003.
I remember some. I think Derek probably told me that.
Yeah, I don't know if I haven't talked to him about it. I don't know if it was. I don't know. He's probably too young to be around there at that point. But it was. Yeah, and it was sold to another optometrist in like somewhere Vallejo or Benicia or something like that. And I've talked to the guy because he owned it from 03 to like 16.
Okay, he put all the miles on it.
Yeah, he bought it with sub 100,000, and he drove it and did some. He did a lot of like the typical enthusiast stuff.
Oh, really? Rallycross? You ever been to Rallycross?
I don't know if he ever tracked it or did anything like that, but like the brakes that were on it, it's got some very aggressive brake pads on it.
Sure.
He went to great lengths to find some wheels that he put on it that I wasn't really a big fan of, and when he heard I took the wheels off, he was kind of disappointed. But my car now, so
right. That's how it works. I think 8 holes obviously fit it a little bit better.
I mean, I like the original look. I mean, I would like some AMG monoblocks would look great.
I've heard varied opinions on ride and
it kills the ride.
Yeah.
And for what I'm doing with this car, it's the stock. The problem is finding 16-inch tires.
Sure.
Especially in it's kind of an oddball size. It's a 225, 55, 16. And I've got like a Michelin like all-season performance tire that is the only 16-inch tire that comes with like a high-speed rating in that size anymore. Everything else is like H or S.
Yeah.
And they've been fine. We'll see. Maybe we'll take it on the next Coastal Range Rally or something. I'm not sure if it'll be that car or this car, but
right. And you just recently did upper and lower wiring harnesses.
Wiring. No, they were disasters. But back when Mercedes was using, I guess, a soy-based insulation on the wiring harness. That
our Mini Cooper people know all about that too.
So I did the upper. I had a friend's shop do the lower, just because we've got a car sitting on our lift at home that doesn't run, so I didn't. And it's a lot easier to do that from underneath the car. So, but that took care of a lot of faults. And I've done some suspension work. It just the last owner didn't drive it much. He had it for 5 years, and he put 1,800 miles on it.
Oh, that's enough.
And of that, about half of that was taking it to Monterey Car Week in 2019. So it mostly just sat in his warehouse, and so it had a lot of deferred maintenance.
Sure. Cool. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that, for somebody that doesn't even know that much about this era of car or about saloon cars or about super saloon cars, they both carry a pretty noticeable presence on the road too. I think one of the only cars I've seen like in the same era that carries the same presence is another M5, which is your E34 M5T. Okay. It's the same kind of car where like you look in the rearview mirror and it carries a pretty sinister kind of presence.
The E28 does too.
Sure.
E28 M5. Bentley Turbo R. That's something you notice coming up in your mirror.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, do you guys have anything else interesting? Any other little tidbits about these cars?
Well, like when we were talking about driving, like Joe was saying, just a sitting in the car, the BMW has some little touches that make it a little different, whereas the Mercedes feels just like a 124.
Right.
They're both cars that, until you really put your foot down, they just feel like a normal sedan, and in the day, they did give you supercar performance in a sedan body.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting thing to remember. Actually, now that you say that, it's hard to have that perspective, like I was saying earlier, on like the power, just the raw power figures these cars were making in the day.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of like what was the 993 putting out at the time, because that was the 993 era, right? That was right at the beginning.
I don't know.
Probably somewhere similar, like
320 horsepower.
And then the
like
348. I bet the 348 Ferrari was lower. I bet it was even less. The NSX was 252 horsepower in its 3.0 era. Like that's amazing. These cars were almost 100 horsepower above this.
Yeah.
And
another 1,000 pounds.
Yeah, it makes a difference. It makes a difference. But fully NA, like it's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
I think.
I mean, that's where the Mercedes, that was very early days for variable valve timing, and so they went about it different ways. 5-liter V8 versus 3.8 liter straight six, and the BMW is just not much electronic trickery. Just twin cam.
Right.
But 6 throttle body is a really nice looking tubular exhaust manifold.
Induction. Nice.
It makes great sounds because of that.
Yeah.
Whereas Mercedes, 5-liter V8 variable valve timing. But yeah, it's a quiet car.
Yeah. It's interesting actually. So Joe and I recently had an R129 SL 500. And I got to drive this 500 not long ago too. That's an interesting comparison between the two of them.
Yeah.
But that motor is amazing.
Yeah.
I do love that motor.
Yeah. Same drivetrain essentially.
Yeah.
I think even down to the diff. I think Mercedes used that diff in this car, which is why they're 4-seaters, because they had to change the floor pan to fit a larger diff to cope with the power.
Yeah, that's right. That makes sense. Cool.
Yeah.
You got any final words?
So which is the better car?
That's actually a good point.
Yeah.
That's actually, I mean, I can't answer that. That's for you guys.
If I were to answer, my answer would be the M5.
Yeah.
They're both very competent on the road. If you were to take a big road trip, both are equals. The Mercedes is a little bit quieter. Maybe it's a little bit more comfortable.
Yep.
But the M5, feels lighter. It's more of an event when you're going out, more sense of occasion.
Right. See, I want to get Kamisa and Derek in here and watch.
Be a whole the fighting.
Yeah, there'd be a fight.
Well, I talked to Jason about this, and he agreed with me that the M5 is the better sports saloon, but maybe not the best saloon car.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know. Maybe I haven't had the 500e long enough to know. But when we went up to Oregon to pick up his 540, we took the 500e.
Yeah. And that was when it was still, you had both old wiring
harnesses. That was probably a bad idea.
Yeah, it was really rough. Somebody said you drove an unreliable car to a more
reliable. We were
reliable.
like 2 hours out of the Bay Area when it first had a stumble. We're just driving along and like a little stumble.
Yeah.
It didn't cut. There was just a little stumble, just a little something like, boy, did you feel that? That wasn't right. And I'm like, geez, we're 2 hours from home. I don't really want to turn around and go back home. We were like coming up to Willows, and I'm like, I don't really want to go home from here and then turn around and go back in that car. Let's just press on. What could happen? And we got up, and I had the wiring harness with me in the trunk. So I thought, worst case scenario, had I known how easy it was to replace the upper harness, I would have just done it, because we talked to our friend who we bought the car from, and he's like, we could do it in my garage if you want. And I'm like, and the rest of the drive up, it was fine. And so we thought, it's driving okay, let's just leave it. And then we turned around, and we were like half an hour outside of Portland coming back south, and it stumbled, and then the check engine light came on, and then the throttle. So this car, it's throttled by wire, but there's a mechanical backup also.
Right.
So basically when the throttle by wire at that point failed. And then, so your first half of the throttle is nothing.
Dead, yeah.
And then you hit the second half, and then you get into the linkage, and so you're still able to drive. And the car drove fine. And then, of course, every time we stopped, we'd shut off. It would reset. It would work for a while. Then it would go back out again.
That's funny.
Until like the final hour of the drive, then everything was fine again.
It's mystery. They have a weird limp mode. I know some of these. This 500e did. I know the 211s did, and I think they still do.
It might be
this day.
That might be it. Yeah. Or you lose all that electronic, like cruise control didn't work.
And it's a weird, even like I don't know. Have you driven a newer V8, like the last model V8 NA V8 Mercedes?
I have.
Ever, the 550,
but not in limp mode.
It does the same, and I've never driven a 500e in that limp mode, but it's basically. It's all throttle by wire, obviously, but it does the same thing where like the first 40% of throttle, it's almost no power, and even when you go down to the floor, it basically won't go below fourth gear.
Yeah.
You have no power, but it's a weird limp mode.
But it gets you home. You could keep driving, and we made it home.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And we were also losing power steering fluid in this thing at that point too.
So then the other question I think that I'm curious about is I would be curious to hear your take on a drive back-to-back of your example and a much lower mile example.
It would be interesting, yeah.
Like there might be significant differences in feel. Like even just like bushings and stuff.
Well, and I'm sure like Derek's car, he's got the monoblocks, he's got an aftermarket exhaust.
He's got, what is it, like 50K miles?
I don't know. Yeah.
But it's under 100,000
I know
miles
the exhaust probably makes a difference just from your feel in the cabin, because when you're in this car, you barely hear the engine.
Right.
And I'm sure the lower profile tires make it feel more sporty and more responsive.
Stands a little more, Yeah, that's an interesting.
You can't turn the traction control off either, though. That's the other downside.
Very intrusive.
Is there no way? There must be some.
Well, there's an aftermarket setup where I think you could wire something in.
Because it's an OBD. It's an OBD2. Is it an OBD1?
No, it's got. I mean, it's like
something weird.
Bosch K-Jet or KE-Jet or something.
Yeah.
It's like, but it's there is a way to do it.
Okay.
But it's not. There's not a. You have to add some sort of aftermarket hardware.
Yeah. Okay.
Or bypass.
It's not one of those weird like depress the brake 5 times and press the honk.
Whereas that car, there is no traction control.
I didn't know that.
There's traction control is your foot.
Is there anything? Are there any driver systems?
ABS. It's got ABS.
Yeah. It's probably illegal not to have ABS at that point.
Yeah, I don't know.
Although Lotus Elise, do Lotus Elises have ABS? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure on
Wouldn't be
the
surprised,
90s.
but yeah.
But yeah, that's about it. I mean.
Anyway, I really do want to get you in a room with the other two and talking about this comparison, because I see so much about the 500e, but I don't see that much about the e34 and
still kind of an under the radar car.
Yeah, it's so funny.
Although these are too. I mean, and they're both. When you look at what was imported, similar numbers came to the U.S. I think 1,600 of those, 1,500 of these.
So there are production numbers on these?
Yeah.
Mercedes is so hard to find production numbers sometimes.
Yeah, I had looked them up at one point. And in both cars, they made about 10,000 of them.
Okay.
And about 1,600 came to the U.S.
Okay.
Officially. And then the gray market cars that have come through.
Right.
I think on the Mercedes, there's not much difference on a U.S. spec versus a gray market car.
Right.
Other than you can get cloth, houndstooth interiors and some cool stuff like that.
A Caro. I really want a Caro 500e.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be able to afford one, but
yeah, that
I'd have to import it. I have to do like a Japanese market buy or auction unseen and then import it. That's like the only way I could justify it. There was that one on the Canadian. There's that Canadian market one that I was looking at, but it went like for what, 38 or 40 or something.
Yeah, it's pretty high. I mean, I guess for what it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, I think it was probably pretty good.
Yeah, those wheels were nice. Really nice wheels, really nice Caro interior, and the exterior was pretty well sorted. I actually got the Derek seal of approval.
Yeah.
For me. Anyway, I think that's an interesting talk, and I actually have to do a lot more digging into the e34s because I just don't know much about their background. Cool.
Yeah, they're coming. They're up and coming.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I think that's it for the day, and thanks for joining us, Mike. I think we'll make some people pretty angry with the 500e hate.
I have no hate for it. I love it.
He owns it.
It's not.
That's true. You don't hate it.
Yeah, no, it's not going anywhere. I love driving it. I just don't know if it's better than that one.
Right.
So.
And you've also daily this for so long. You know this car so well.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you, I've driven both of these cars to this location in the morning. And I almost fell asleep this morning in the 500e like 4 times.
You did say that when you got to the show.
I don't fall asleep in the M5.
Oh, you've got I mean, the 500e is comfortable. I mean, I've done a lot more road trips and rallies and track days in those cars.
Yeah.
Whereas this, I mean, I could see taking this on a rally. I don't know if I would take it on to a track day.
Right.
With an automatic and traction control and 16-inch all-season tires.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
But
cool.
For what they are, they're both very fun.
Right. Cool. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.
Bye.
All right. Let's hope everything recorded.
Yeah.